Hello there everyone, Lars here from Camille's Harem, with finally a follow-up to my Deltarune review as I dive into Deltarune Chapter 2, brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And yes! Holy dang, I did not expect to be able to make a video like this really anytime soon. The announcement that Deltarune Chapter 2 is coming out caught me totally off guard. It was a fantastic way to be blindsided in a week that was going rather slowly and kind of badly for myself, and boom! Here it came, and to know that the chapters came out so soon, I got it the day that it came out, and wow, the only reason why this video isn't coming out even sooner is that I've just been super busy. I've been working real hard at my full-time job, and on top of that, I've been working on 2 books and various other projects, and so, yeah, well, here I am at long last, and I'm so excited to dive into Deltarune Chapter 2 with you all. And this is definitely going to be an installment within the game that requires a whole lot of videos to really dive into. And yes, I am going to do that because there is so much that I have gained from playing this chapter. And before I get any further, I just want to say something real quick. I apologize if any of your comments in our videos haven't received any sort of love from us or any sort of answer. I watch as sometimes we get comments on our videos and they're immediately retracted. I don't know if that is the writer deciding to take them down or if it's YouTube striking them. I don't know which, but here at Camille's Harem, we love to engage with our audience. We love to have conversations with them. And so I apologize if any of your comments go missing for whatever reason. I promise it is not us trying to hunt people down and remove things that we don't like, because, hey, both positive and negative comments alike are great to us and we love to engage with them. So thank you for checking out this video and for commenting. Alright, so that little aside out of the way, let's dive into Deltarune Chapter 2. So after the kind of horrifying events to the end of Deltarune Chapter 1, where Kris rips out the player's soul, throws into a cage, and a knife comes out in their hands, I love that this transitioned to a great gag about Kris eating all of Toriel's pie. That was awesome. I loved it. Good on you, Toby Fox, for really subverting our expectations in a great way. So already a little bit of writing advice right here. If you want to know how to subvert an audience's expectations, you take stuff that the audience already knows and you then use it in a moment that the audience doesn't expect. So in Deltarune Chapter 1, if you pay very close attention to all of the different comments and dialogue and conversations, you learn that Kris really is a trickster, and that this is something that should totally have been expected, but in the moment we were so caught off guard. And it is shocking because, as we come to learn in this chapter, there's a whole lot more going on with Kris and the player's soul, and with what's really going on behind the scenes within the story. So as I proceed with this, let me just say that I feel like my first review of Deltarune Chapter 1 was pretty much on the money. I'm still holding to my guns about a lot of this stuff, about where the game's going to end up, it's the ultimate showdown and everything like that. Maybe I was getting a little bit too crazy right here with saying that Chara from Undertale has come into the game. I think there's probably a little bit more nuance than that, but overall, I still am holding to what I thought back in that previous video. If you haven't checked out that review, I will make sure that it is linked, so that way you can check it out, because it is pretty good. And I feel like, once again, I was kind of right on the money with a lot of things about the world building, that the Dark World is real, that its consequences are very real, and that Gaster is indeed implementing some sort of crazy experiment right here on Kris and the other people at Hometown. So there's a lot going on. But, and man, just because there's so much going on, this is why there's going to have to be multiple videos about this chapter, because there's just so much to talk about. All of it is great, and a lot of it is great examples of good writing and lessons that we as writers should be able to take away from it. And I'm beginning to ramble, so let's just move on. One of the things that I absolutely love about this story is the character progression, how it all makes sense. And it is just amazing to see Susie as the protagonist, really, of the story, because I honestly do think at this point that Susie really is the protagonist of Deltarune, as we get to see her go from the mean girl to the exuberant hero. And what I love is that she's still rude. She's still mean in many different cases. She's still very rough around the edges. And that's totally fine and awesome because, well, as of the previous chapter, as of yesterday within the game, Susie hasn't had really any friends that she can rely on. And now she has her first real friends in Lancer, in Ralsei, in Kris especially. And I love that Susie she holds on to this. The conversation that she has with Kris right before they jump into the dark world, where she's afraid that everything that happened the day before was just a dream and that it won't end, that will end up not being true. And in the dialogue, it's clear that she hopes that she and Kris will still be friends. And that is such an amazing moment right there, because it goes to show that no matter what happened the day before, whether real or imagined, that it meant something to her. And that says so much about the lonely person that she has been, and it shows that this is something very precious to her. This is something that she wants to hold on. And throughout the entire game, Susie goes out of her way to hold on to these friendships that she's had and these new friendships that she's gaining with other characters. And it's really, really great to see just to what lengths she goes to maintain these new relationships. I mean, for one thing, kneeling down next to Burley and being kind to him after everything that he did, that says a lot about how Susie has grown. And no matter how you see things going between Susie and Noelle, it's clear that Susie at this point realizes, hey, there's another great friend here in Noelle, and I am going to do what I can to hold on to that, help her to feel comfortable, help her to feel accepted within this friend circle and accepted in my life. And that says so much about how Susie has grown and opened up. That now that she's had a taste of friendship, this is what she wants. And that is so cool. It's nice to see that she isn't being some sort of meaner loner girl or anything like that, but that she is totally opening up to other people. Granted, it is still kind of on her terms, and like I said, a lot of her personality is still there and intact, and I love that because really that's who she is. And that's totally fine that she continues to be a rude, crude, brash girl, because that's fantastic. That's the Susie that we all fell in love with, and that's the Susie that we continue to want to see throughout these games. So Toby's being consistent with his characters, but he's also developing his characters. This is one of the reasons why I say that Susie really is the protagonist, because not only is she one of the heroes of the game, but she is one of the main characters who is shown as having the most growth. There really is no other character within the story who has received as much growth as her. The only other one really is Kris, and that's because of all the time that we spend with them and being able to explore what is going on in their lives. And I'm going to get to that in just a little bit. But yeah, I am excited to see what else will come down the road with Susie, because she is absolutely on fire. And this really embodies what Toby said when he first released Deltarune Chapter 1, that he hoped that we would become friends with everyone. And through Susie's experience, we are slowly becoming friends with everyone. And there is still a lot of room for growth. One of the things I love is that how at the end of chapter 2, as you're going with Susie around town, you get to learn about the people that she has grudges with or against, such as Caddy or Monster Kid. There are still definitely some rivalries, some misunderstandings, some very real hurt feelings that need to be addressed, and that they will be addressed as the story continues. This is really, really good. Now, moving on to Kris. There is a lot going on here with Kris. One of the things that I enjoy about how Toby Fox has structured Deltarune is that Kris can either be an absolute blank slate of a character, much like Frisk was, or Kris can be a very intricate, very complex character. And that is something that you can explore as a player if you wish. And as you explore that, you find that there is a lot about Kris that is going on here. Not just simply that they are the creepy, funny kid within town who is also the sole human, but that Kris deals with some anxiety as being the only human. And as a human who also, well, kind of wants to be a monster. It's kind of telling that when you're in the library, if you go poking around the books, you find that there's a book about humans that Kris does not want to read. And that as we know from chapter 1, Kris wanted to look like a monster, wanted to look very much like one of the members of the Dreamer family. And so right here we see a continuation of that. That for Kris, this is their home, which will only be further complicated by a lot of the things that happen at the very end of chapter 2, which, yeah, spoiler warning, I am definitely going there with some of these things. So hold on to your butts, because here comes one of the very first spoilers. The fight with Spamton. This is so interesting right here because it throws the fight, first of all, with Jevil in a whole new light. The 2 fights so far with bosses that you don't have to fight, these optional bosses, Jevil and Spamton, these are fights that reflect the fight going on with Kris and the player, but also I am very confident that it is Gaster as well. That Kris finds themselves in a horrible situation where they are being controlled by us, the player, but also that the strings are being pulled by Gaster, who has been pulling the strings really since the very beginning by teasing us with the ability to choose and create our own character, only for that choice to be stripped away from us. Gaster is playing around with both of us, with all of us in this particular scenario, but we as the player with our own autonomy are messing around as well with Kris, and Kris wishes to break into freedom. Kris wishes to be free of what's happening to them. Kris wishes to cut the strings that hold them there and lead their own life, but not just because of us as the player, because we control Kris, but also because of other strings that are being pulled by Gaster. Kris is not in control. And yet, despite it all, there's still so much that we can learn about Kris. About how Kris wasn't just childhood friends with Noelle, but also with Noelle's older sister Des, and that there was kind of this troop of 4 with Kris, Noelle, Des, and with Azrael, and that we already get an implied first meeting with Gaster when they went into the woods and to the creepy doors. Something happened. And it's interesting because Noelle says that she loves to be scared, and yet at the same time, there's something creepy and scary about Kris that Noelle just can't stand. There's a bit more to their history that we have yet to learn. This means that there's still a lot of actual character development for Kris to have. On top of that, we get to see how Kris continues to react with Ralsei. And yeah, I will eventually at some point have to talk about all of the different relationships that are being set up in Chapter 2, because holy moly, there are a lot of potential relationships that are being teased out here. And yes, it might just be a meme, but it is absolutely true. Susie is by now a true harem protagonist with a growing harem of guys and gals following her. But in any case, Kris is also developing a lot of relationships with other characters and understanding with Birdley. And it's quite interesting to see how Kris and Birdley really aren't all that different from each other. And I like that this is shown without Birdley having to say, "We're the same, you and I," because that's so cliche. No, instead we get to see that through Birdley's confession at the end of their fight. I really, really like this. And I like how we get to see that Kris can still forge a relationship with Ralsei in various ways. This comes back to what I said in my previous review about Deltarune, that Ralsei's kind of there, most likely as an imprint of Azrael, to be there for Kris, and that as such, Ralsei can become whatever Kris needs to help Kris be the hero, or to help Kris discover more about themselves. It's really cool. It's really interesting this way. That's something that you can't really do in any written story, having that much autonomy for a player and for other characters to discover themselves. This is something that a video game can pull off, and it's so cool to see Toby Fox taking full advantage of that. I also like to see how Kris and Susie's relationship continues to grow. As you know, if you've been with this channel now for a while, I ship Cruzy. I ship Kris and Susie together. I think it's adorable. And what I like is that you have that option still very much here within the game, but at the same time, what is very, very important is that friendship. How their friendship continues to evolve, and I love that Toby provides 2 different ways for that to happen. Actually, really 3, depending on which route you go. If you go the Snowgrave route, well, it's kind of dark, but Susie, because of the adventures that you had in Chapter 1, Susie becomes a support to Kris. She now totally reciprocates the friendship that was shown to her in the first chapter, and now becomes the support that Kris needs. Or Susie can continue to be one of Kris's best friends and just be someone that they can go adventuring with, discovering the dark world and the real world with. Or you can pursue some romantic options right here, which is, once again, just very interesting to see. Is one of the things that I said in my Cruzy analysis video, that if you want to keep this friendship going strong, you need to see where it goes next. And I love that Toby has already planned this out for how their relationship can continue to progress in various ways, in both the worst way possible and in other ways, depending on what you, the player, decide to explore. And this is one of the things that I believe is very important as we go deeper into the game of Deltarune. This idea of choice and determination, because we're told very, very clearly at the beginning of the first chapter that in this world, choice doesn't matter. And it felt like in the first game, no matter what you did, you were being railroaded to a certain conclusion, which happens again in Chapter 2. And yet, the choices that you made in Chapter 1 carry over to Chapter 2. And the choices that you make in Chapter 2 will invariably carry on over to Chapter 3. So while there's an overarching plot that kind of drives what's happening, all of the discovery of the characters is left up to you as the player. What we are seeing right here in the game Deltarune is the very embodiment of what I like to call Hanging Gardens of Babylon writing. And that's basically a combination of garden/discovery writing with architect writing. Architect writing is where you very rigidly say, this is the plot, these are the characters, this is what's going to happen, points A through Z, that is it will be perfect, boom, we build it, we make it, it's good. Garden/discovery writing is when you just go on in, you have an idea of the plot, you have an idea of the characters, you have an idea of the world, but nothing is fully hammered out, and instead you explore it throughout the story. You can combine these 2 styles together where you say, look, I have a very solid plot. I know from points A to Z what should happen, but in the meantime, my characters, I will discover them as I go throughout the story, and I will see who they become when I get to the last point, when I get to the last mile marker, when I get to the conclusion. I will see who they have transformed into. And that is what I see happening right here with Deltarune. That the choices that we make, while they do not alter how the story progresses, They alter who the characters are. And this ties into, once again, what I think will happen, that we're going to have an amazing ultimate showdown in the last chapter, a showdown between Kris and Azrael as the roaring now comes, as we now know what the darkness really is, that we know that there are these titans, there's this thing called the roaring, the breaking of the world. It gave me legit goosebumps as Ralsei expressed what would happen if we let the darkness be unleashed upon the entire world. And that is the fate that awaits us all if we cannot bring this game to a good resolution. And that resolution comes with how the characters have developed. And like I said when I did my first Deltarune review, I do believe that it all comes back to Susie. That the friendship that is forged with Susie, and that friendship which we encourage throughout the game, will be what helps save the day, as powers and destinies, heroes and villains, all in the end clash. It comes down to our number one best girl in Deltarune, Susie. Now, to dive into another spoiler, which is the ending, when we realize that Kris is very likely the knight. It's like 99% confirmed that Kris is the knight. And this is where things get very, very interesting right here. When Gaster said, I have this new experiment. It's dark, darker, yet darker still. Oh, we've gotten to it right here. This is why I think it's so important to understand that Kris is caught between two different powers, us as the player and Gaster. We as the player, we get to determine a lot of what is going on, but Gaster controls Kris when we aren't. This is why Kris is not in control in any kind of way, and Gaster is playing around with what Kris wants. Remember that the Dark World is a representation of what is going on in the world of the Lightners, and it is a world that helps the Lightners deal with different issues that they are facing, such as within this chapter, we know that Noelle does not have a good relationship with her mother, and we get to see that toxic daughter-mother relationship between her and Queen. I wish that we had gotten deeper into that, because I feel like there's a whole lot that's missing, a whole lot that needs to be done, but that will probably be addressed in later chapters going down the road. But coming back to what we see at the end of the chapter, when Kris pulls out this glowing knife and creates a whole new dark fountain. What we've got going on here is this. So we as the player, we're playing around, we're dealing with the effects of these dark fountains coming out. Meanwhile, Gaster continues to use Kris to create these dark fountains and allows Kris and the others within the game to address things within their own lives. Now, this is kind of interesting right here, because when you go this particular route, you begin to realize, wait a second here. So what is the end game exactly? How are the Titans supposed to be released and all of this different stuff? Because we're quite clearly leading up to some fantastically huge battle. Well, all of this is to prepare the final battle, because there are things that Kris needs to resolve in their life in order to be ready to face Azrael and the end of the assigned week that Toby has laid out. Every adventure that we go on is helping to resolve various issues that allow Kris to proceed and get to the next level within the adventure, leading up to the final boss fight. Gaster is playing a very complex game right here, because he wants to see ultimately determination versus determination, because that's what he's been experimenting with all this time, and doing it in a world where your choices don't matter. Why don't they matter? Well, because the story must progress this way, and he is pulling all the strings to make sure that there are no deviations. This is nuts. There's a whole lot that I could say right here, and especially as a writer, this comes down to the whole idea of not just architect writing and discovery writing, but also of railroading. We have so much going on right here. We have a story that's being railroaded while characters are being discovered in a plot that has been very, 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 very well built together by a supreme architect, Toby Fox, who is exploring so many different avenues for the story to go, I mean, this is nuts. This must have been what it's like for people to first play Mass Effect for the first time. Say, what? You mean that all this matters and the story's going where? Yeah. Oh boy. And I find myself kind of rambling a little bit right here, but in all honesty, yeah, this is what I really do believe is going on. Now then, what does all of this mean? What does Deltarune Chapter 2 mean within the greater story? Well, Deltarune Chapter 2 not only gives us a lot of phenomenal world building that builds up on what we saw in Deltarune Chapter 1, but it begins to set up everything else that will come afterwards. And very importantly, it's helping us to develop a ton of different relationships. Once again, coming back to it, Toby says that he was looking forward to everyone being friends with everyone. That is the goal of the game. And as such, we have to explore all of these different relationships and see how friendships can blossom in an environment where once you thought, well, nothing's going to change right here. This is a classroom where we very clearly have our cool kids, our smart kids, our bullies, our bullied, those who are just being off to the side, the class clowns, the class goth, and that's basically it. You are in your corner, you have your label, and that is all that you are. And yet this game is breaking all of that down. This is quite fantastic. So Deltarune Chapter 2 is all about building up the relationships and setting up for even more friendships to be built, as well as letting the story continue to progress down the path that it's supposed to. There's a ton of world building that happens here in this chapter, especially with how the Dark World operates, and once again, its relationship to the world of the Lighteners. And because Susie, I believe, is indeed the protagonist of this story, this really means a lot for her, because this goes to show, at least to Susie, that what happened the previous day isn't just a one-time thing. She can be loved by lots of people. She can have lots of friends. The life that she once knew doesn't have to be what she has to be for all eternity. She can change. The world can change around her. And she isn't just talking about how she's changing and how she now has these friendships with Kris at the end of the game. She is honestly talking about how they can change the world and bring their friends together. This is really, really cool. And this is what we want to see. We want to see characters progress. We want to see the world progress. We want to see the plot progress. Chapter 2, I believe, really hit everything out of the park. And this is why, once again, I'm going to have to make some more videos and dive deeper into all of these different aspects. For those of you who've been wondering, yes, I will be doing a follow-up specifically to Cruzy, but I also want to dive into the other relationships because there's so much rich stuff there, especially for people who want to know more about, hey, how do I write good romance? How do I write great character interactions? And this is where I believe that Toby really excels as a creator, is in how the different characters interact, because this game really cranked that up to 11 with not just the dialogue bubbles and whatnot, but how even in fights there are more conversations going on, and there's more insight that you can get into all of these characters. So I'm definitely going to do something like that. And if there's more that you would actually like to know from about a writer's perspective on this game, then please let me know down in the comments. And whew, yeah, I've gone on already for quite some time. There's just so much that I can say about this game, so much I do want to say, so I should probably shut up right now and get to working on all of that. So, in the meantime, if you would like to be notified for when we do release those other videos about Deltarune, then please make sure that you are subscribed to our channel. We'd love to have you along to this adventure we call writing. And if you are a writer looking for more writing advice, then please go check out our other videos here on the channel. We also have a podcast, Camille's Harem, found on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, the works. You can go and you can check out those. Those episodes are phenomenal. It's going to get the entire harem together and just having a great time talking about stories, like what makes a good story, what makes a horrible story, and so forth. We also have writing exercises for you to check out over on our Pinterest page, and we would love for you to join us over at our Discord page. Links for all of those sites are down in the description, and until the next video, y'all, tschüss.